Hey Antonio, welcome back.
It's true. Yeah, I'm back. I've been here. Oh, how many years now? I'm not counting.
Antonio, the last time we met is 2 years ago, I think.
During COVID time, we couldn't see
I
each
guess
other.
so. It was the episode 135, I guess. Actually, I looked it up and forgot about that.
Well,
Antonio.
if it was in 2021,
Yeah, it was.
well, we were in the middle of the COVID or no, at the end, I think.
135 writing boring software from WebLogic over Glassfish to Quarkus. And it was April 2021.
Yeah, we were locked in.
Yeah.
But Adam, since then, the world has opened up and we haven't met physically in none of the conferences yet.
Yeah, but because I still enjoy my lockdown. I try to avoid conferences and focus on code. So everyone forgot about me. So this is actually good quiet time. So
I I like to go. I've been to Devox Belgium,
Mhm.
Devox France, of course, and that's less conferences than I used to go. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Less Java user groups. Also, I think that the local user groups took a bit more time to recover after the COVID.
Mhm.
So in France, before the COVID, there was more than 20 active user groups.
Mhm.
And I can see that it's still a bit quiet.
Mhm.
There used to be monthly meetings, throughout the entire country. Now it's quieter. Some user groups have not disappeared, but are a bit shy in terms of conferences. Some still do remote stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think the COVID affected small user groups more than big conferences.
Mhm.
I organize Devox. It's a huge machine. You have to book the venue 2 or 3 years in advance. Things must happen because the cost is so high. And
Mhm.
when you are a user group, you have this flexibility
Mhm.
of doing a conference or not. You don't have the same pressure. And I think some of them are still struggling to come back.
I attended two in-person Java user groups since then. One was in Zurich, and it was extremely well attended. So I was surprised. I think 100 people or something.
Good.
And the other one was Enterprise Java User Group Linz, was the very first after COVID, so like revamp. And this was okay, like I think 20 attendees, but very passionate. But this was a small one in Linz in Austria. So this was my user group, and online was Chicago, but everything was online. Hmm. What are you doing since 2 years? Are you still working as a freelancer or what?
Wow, life has changed so much, Adam. I was 2 years ago. I was yeah a freelancer doing my things. Due to COVID and due to lockdown, I've lost a few customers. That's when I had the idea of writing two books on Quarkus.
Hmm.
When I get bored, I write books,
Yeah.
and then life has changed.
What were the titles of the books so we can promote them?
Understanding so the understanding Quarkus.
Hmm.
So it goes through a few technologies used by
Hmm.
Quarkus, CDI, JAX-RS,
Hmm.
reactive programming, and so
So you
on.
basically copied the Glassfish book over to Quarkus, right?
No, totally different actually, but no. It's
You
true
changed the
that
font. You changed the font,
I
right?
changed
So
the font.
very
No,
good.
it's true that on the CDI, JAX-RS, being
Hmm.
validation, JPA, all the common stuff,
Hmm.
it was quite interesting because I did some copy paste and updated
Hmm.
the technologies. But then it's full Quarkus. So understanding Quarkus and practicing Quarkus, where it's a more hands-on. It takes you from page one till the last page, and you build microservices and so on. So
Hmm.
the understanding is really going from technology A to technology B to technology C, and practicing. It's really
Hmm.
let's develop an entire microservice architecture.
Funny story about Quarkus and Glassfish because I think the last time we talked was 2 years ago. But last year I was um, I was invited to a conference, and the conference was a big one. It was JDD. Maybe you also know the conference in Krakow.
Yeah.
And the interesting part is the very first time I think I attended 2006 or 8, and then 2010. I submitted a talk, Java is 6, the future is now, but it's not evenly distributed yet. And the cool story is they invited me again, but I did some research in my mailbox and I found my old proposal. So what I did, I looked it up and I found myself on YouTube. So I rewatched my talk, what I did. And I think, okay, this was Glassfish. So what I did 10 years later, I migrated my old code, to see whether I was actually right, to Quarkus. And it worked more or less out of the box from Java 6 to Java 17, I think, last year. And then I deployed as Lambda, as an function to be serverless. But because I think what we preach now all the time, that like the Java is stable, and it is actually true. If you take a look at Glassfish code, it's very, very similar to a 10 years old code. So either what surprised me rewatching my own talk, how modern back then Java already looked. So there was not much difference. The only difference is back then we had stateless, and now we replace stateless with request scoped and transactional. This is the main difference. And anything else was pretty much the same. Even back then, I didn't use private anymore for unit testing, and in Quarkus I do the same. So, and this is what my clients really like, because they say, okay, we have to go to the cloud. What do we have to do? And I say, actually, nothing. If your application was already built back then, with no dependencies and lean and pragmatic, then if you are lucky, there is nothing else to do. And if you used crazy frameworks and dependencies, we have to remove the crazy frameworks and dependencies first.
Interesting that you say that, because I'm sure you remember the good old pet store, and the Java pet store was created by Sun for all the J2EE design patterns and so on. And I took this idea of pet store and I wrote a Java EE7 pet store, or Java EE6, I can't remember, 7. And a few months ago, I was trying to migrate that to Quarkus. And it's interesting what you're saying, because the most difficult thing, and then I stopped, I didn't have time. But the most difficult thing I had to do was going from stateful to stateless. That was the only thing. Then the code just basically worked. But because I was using EJB stateful and JSF with stateful, the conversation scope and application scope, that was the most difficult thing. And I was trying to figure out how to re-architecture the entire thing. Other than that, the backend till from the stateless to the database, JAX-RS endpoints, nothing has changed. Worked out of the box 10 years after.
Yeah, which is crazy. And of course, JSF, you could still run them, but this is they are different, different, how to call it, requirements for JSF, because if you would like to be offline or whatever, it's not doable easily with JSF. So this is why the presentation has to change anyway, but the backend can be usually completely reused, and the migration is way easier than actually estimated even by my client. So I would say the entire Java EE micro profile is a huge success story, actually.
And I was talking to Graham Rocher, the father of Micronaut, and a couple of weeks ago, so just recently, even Micronaut is looking into the core profile. So the core profile is something new in Jakarta EE10, and it's basically CDI Lite plus.
Are you involved in Jakarta EE10?
No, I stopped that.
Okay, because what interests me now, how many implementations are there of Jakarta EE core profile right now? Because it would be super interesting just to use the Jakarta EE core profile just for experimentation would be interesting.
Yeah.
What we talk now about, before I forget, what I think I wanted last week actually to try something. I getting more and more interested in JSPs, Java Server Pages, because server-side rendering, the entire JavaScript community goes that way, and we had actually the JSPs, and JSPs are crazy fast. And what I thought, how to extract just the JSP engine from, I don't know, Tomcat or Jetty or whatever, is I took a look at Jasper, just during the launch. So okay, this would be an interesting project. Because I think something like this will happen, that we need something server side. JSF is too component based, and we need just a template language like Velocity or FreeMarker, or even JSPs are just enough. I mean, JSP were okay, I mean, was Qt. We have, of course, Qt in Quarkus, but Qt is Qt in Quarkus, and JSP would be everywhere.
So that's the thing. I asked the Quarkus team, why are you doing Qt? Yet another templating language. And funny enough, Micronaut is also doing their own regular expression language and templating. And both is because of reactive model. So JSP is really blocking. You go, you ask the JSP, please compile yourself and bring that back. And the Quarkus team decided not to use something like JSP or Mustache or all these templatings because of their reactive mode. So that's why they had to recreate a new expression language and recreate a new templating. So if JSP wants a brand new future, maybe they could also have a look into that. I don't know all the technical details, but Quarkus said, no, we can't have a reactive backend, a reactive model, and then the JSP blocking in front of that.
But if you think, if you take a look at JSP, what happens? So the first thing is the compiler kicks in and it compiles the JSP into a servlet. And if you take a look under the servlet, there's just string concatenation. So basically what happens, the string gets concatenated and one huge string gets returned. And if we get, Project Loom, what it will mean is that every request can run on a virtual thread. But if you will get reactivity in the JSP, what this would mean is that, multiple threads can process one request, right? The question is whether it is worth to have multiple threads running inside a request, because if you're running in the cloud, usually you have one core or less, so it doesn't matter a lot. So this would be the first thing. And back to Micronaut, I'm really happy that Micronaut is looking at microprofile, or at least the core profile, because I would like to use Micronaut, but I cannot because all my projects are microprofile or Jakarta E, and right now they only support JAX-OS and a bit of CDI and bin validation. I think something is missing. Jason, I think this would be already good. Are they support JAX-OS is supported, CDI I think a bit, and bin validation. Would I need a JSON-B or JSON-P or something? But there's not everything was supported, so this actually would be nice if they would support more, so you would get three great runtimes: Micronaut, Quarkus, and Helidon.
Yeah, if you look at the Jakarta EE website, so they don't talk about reference implementation, anymore. They talk about compatible implementations, and Quarkus is still not there, and even for the core profile. The core profile now, but the web profile. And I asked the Quarkus team, why is Quarkus not, a compatible implementation on the Jakarta EE? And the answer was, I wasn't expecting this one, but the Jakarta EE specification still asks you to package the app in a WAR file. And as you know, Spring Boot, Quarkus, Micronaut don't do it anymore. So it's just because of this silly thing of the Jakarta EE specification asks you to run the bloody WAR file, which is...
One criticism I have to the Jakarta EE website is really hard to find the implementations. You have to be really dedicated to find them. It's way better with microprofile. As a microprofile, if you go through the front page, you find the specs and the implementations easier. And the Jakarta EE website is a bit too formal. So I think for an outsider, it is really hard to find something because you go to Jakarta EE 11 and you just find, the specs and then no implementations. And I would like to make, or I think it would be a good idea to make the implementations a bit more prominent, Because,
yeah, that's true. I think... it's way better than the JCP website, that's for sure. But even when you look at they list all the specifications, which is good. It's way clearer than it was. But then, if you go to the Jakarta EE specification website, you will see all the specifications, and some are already working on Jakarta EE 11, Some are still in 10, of course. So you have a mix of all these specifications with their own versions, and you don't know if this version, happens to be part of EE10 or EE11 or EE9. So it's still a bit confusing. Yeah.
Back to you. So what you said, lots changed. So we have a short excursion to Jakarta in microprofile. You've wrote 2 books. Once, you have to understand Quarkus first, and then the second book, what you can do with it, right? So this is the next one. And the last page was wait until my 3rd book, Now, how to refactor if you did something, it was wrong. Now I show you the how to architect a Glassfish. Quarkus. So what happened to you? So you wrote 2 books, and then you said my life changed.
My life changed completely.
You sold millions of Quarkus books, and now you are on a lonely
billionaire.
island. Lonely island, locked down again, right?
No. I was, after 17 years of being an independent and a contractor and going from customer to customer, there was this funny story with Microsoft. As 17 years of being independent, you can imagine that many companies have tried to, employ me and, hey, Antonio, why don't
I
you
can
come
imagine,
and work for us? And I was always, no, not ready for it. And actually, Microsoft approached me for a position. And after 7 interviews, I failed miserably.
What they ask you? What? How is the interview like?
No, it was quite interesting. It's not like, the interviews at Google where you have to do crazy algorithms and so on. No, it wasn't like that at all. And I didn't got the first job offer, mostly because I was based in Europe. And they needed someone in the US because the entire team was mostly in Europe and Asia, and they wanted someone in the US. And I said, look, guys, I'm not changing places. I'm good here in Paris. But during this process, actually, I had a few good, feelings with a few members of the interview staff. And a couple of months after, one of these persons pinged me and said, hey, remember me? We met during these interviews at Microsoft 2 months ago. We have a new opportunity that could fit you better. And here I joined. That's 18 months ago. I'm in what's called a developer division. So basically, I do the same work as I used to do. So I'm still working with customers. The good thing is it's more and more throughout the world. So that's the beauty of the lockdown. I think everybody got used to talk in front of a webcam. So I have customers in Asia, customers in Africa, in Europe. So that's quite interesting. And of course, customers who work with Java on Azure. So I'm really developer division is the interface between our customers. So I help our customers to migrate to Azure, refactor their app for the cloud and so on, but also to our engineering team who develops Azure, who develops services around Azure, APIs, SDKs. So it's really, if one customer complains about something, you bring it back to the Azure team and say, well, this is not working. We should do it better. So it's really interesting. I've been working for more than 30 years now, and I wasn't expecting so much fun at this time of my career. And
20 years ago, you wouldn't even expect to have fun at Microsoft, right? So
Microsoft, can you imagine?
Yeah.
And I've just joined the company 18 months ago, and I joined a company who was starting to do Java. Java. Microsoft has been doing Java for 5-6 years. It's not as proeminent as .NET as you can imagine. But I joined a company 18 months ago where I was doing Java on Azure. And 18 months later, I'm doing AI on Java and Azure. There's AI everywhere. When I joined the company, there was a few bits and pieces. You could hear some internal speech about AI.
Can we expect a Java API to AI?
No, I think
You see?
no, an API, no. You will just, at the moment it will be one method taking a string and returning a string.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a plugin, yeah. So a function, Java util function.
Because you can, when you interact with APIs, with, for example, Azure OpenAI, which is, the Azure version of OpenAI, you can register to have access if you want. It's still limited access, but it's open to everybody. And if you use the Azure OpenAI, what you can do is pass kind of metadata to your prompt. But that's basically
like the context, right? Like
the context. But that's basically it. At the moment is you send a huge string and it returns a huge string. So you send a prompt and it returns
like servlets. This is we need a JSP for that.
Exactly. Well, the good thing is it keeps the context if you ask it. So that's interesting. You can have this multi-prompt thing.
Antonio, we need a conversation scope again.
Conversation scope. That's a good one. That's a good one.
So we can reuse your Java E7 pet store, in Azure AI.
That's a good conversation scope for OpenAI.
Yeah, this would be great. By the way, do you know that Glassfish is alive? Again.
Yes.
I just opened the GitHub issue page, and they are on fire. At least in the Iron Times and the Mate. And they contribute a lot of stuff, which is interesting because 10 years ago it was supposed to be dead, and now something happened. So it's just interesting story,
Yeah, and even it's on the we're talking about the Jakarta EE compatible implementations. It's even there. You have a Payara, of course, but Glassfish is there. So.
Interesting.
Glassfish 7 is back. Yeah, there's WebLogic. Also, WebLogic, I think 14C implemented Jakarta EE10.
Wow.
And so you have WebLogic on one side, Glassfish on the other side, Payara. I still... And now all that belongs to Oracle, and Oracle is a funny shop where they have their own, Elidon.
But Glassfish not. Glassfish doesn't belong to Oracle anymore. It's like open source. This is the Payara guys not Payara, Piranha, Aryan Times, and the Mate. You don't know it? They created their own company.
So it's not Oracle anymore because I thought they had taken Glassfish back. Okay.
No, there's Aryan Times from the Java E spec and the Mate, and I think they are there's a new company. And they are doing this, which is really interesting.
Okay.
No Oracle. No,
because Payara was, a fork of Glassfish many years ago, and I thought Glassfish had come back.
No, it's Omnifish and Piranha Cloud. So the Omnifish, and they are the prior Payara guys, which are now contributing back to Glassfish, which is a really interesting story because it's independent consulting company. So we have actually Piranha and Payara. And Glassfish are two competing independent Java E vendors, which is interesting.
Gee, I'm not a lawyer, but I really wonder what happened in terms of licensing and IP.
I don't know. So this is we have to ask ChatGPT or Azure AI. What's
Azure
your opinion? Azure AI. We send this string over and we wait for the response. And Helidon is Oracle, which is great, and Helidon and Micronaut are working together, which is two really interesting runtime.
Well, Helidon comes more from the WebLogic side of it. It's the same team, and they are trying to do something out of WebLogic. I think the story of Helidon could look like the story of WebSphere and Liberty. It's more or less the same company, more or less the same teams. The products have common points, Micronaut comes from a totally different
Yeah.
story into Oracle, but it's strange because Elidon and Micronaut, compete in a way.
Yeah, but Micronaut, it uses they are completely different. So Micronaut uses annotation processors to optimize its startup, and the Helidon is just lean. So there's completely different implementations, and Helidon is like completely microprofile compatible, and Micronaut is not. And Micronaut has super fast, APIs, and it borrows some APIs like the persistence to Helidon. So really interesting part what happens right now. The only thing what renders Helidon unusable for me is you cannot run it in a serverless because the plugin is missing. So you could use Micronaut or Quarkus for its own Azure function, but you cannot do this with Helidon right now, which I don't understand because it's not too much to do. I also asked the Omnifish people why they are not doing this, and they tried, but maybe I don't know. They don't see they don't see the opportunity, because what I do recently for 2 years already, we are migrating old, Java E monolith, and monolith is now back in the game. Now, if you say I'm a monolith architect, you get the best job ever. So Microsoft got that. Yeah. So this is actually very good because in the Microsoft era, I always said I do microservices, but only 2 or 3, and everyone was happy. And now I say, okay, they were actually what I told you 3 years ago. It was actually a monolith, and everyone is happy. So what I do right now, I try to package as big monolith as possible and ship it as Azure Function or AWS Lambda, and it works excellent because it is for enterprise app, especially because the usage profile in enterprise. The people are working sometimes from 9 to 5 if you're lucky, and afterwards nothing happens. And if you have Azure Functions on demand or AWS Lambda, then it is very cheap to run it, and also compatible with Green IT and CO2 consumption, and good for the birds and everything else, right? So this is
the birds and the white bears.
Yeah, white bears, and for your holes you dig, where was it in Africa, or everything is actually good.
Well, first you have to compile it with Graal VM, and that kills a few birds.
Yeah, but they were sick anywhere. So.
You just kill the sick birds. Graal VM only kill the sick birds. Okay, yeah. Adam, let's write that down.
Yeah, I will cut it off, of course. But what we're actually running on OpenJDK and on Amaretto. I wanted to say Corretto.
Corretto.
Because. It just optimizes if the function remains hot, and on Azure Function that is the case if you have the premium subscription, and AWS as well. All subsequent calls get optimized, so it can be even cheaper, more cost effective to run it on JDK than on GraalVM. GraalVM is good for the startup time. So yeah, but interesting.
And you know that AWS a few months ago also announced
Snapstart.
Snapstart.
We are using this already.
With the crack JVM. And it's true that look into this crack CRAC, and it really looks interesting. I haven't played.
The interesting part, what I learned as well, is not the crack what AWS did. They are persisting the entire stack, not only the JVM, the entire VM, so the entire micro VM. Which is really interesting because we can. It starts in 1.5 seconds, and then it is really warm.
And it's fully optimized already.
Yeah, and this is actually what I'm mainly doing. No kidding. So because the future of cloud. Maybe I didn't know that you are working for Azure, so we can actually talk about Azure, which is also interesting. The future of cloud, and I think we have similar mindset. So what I liked about Jakarta E and Java E and J2E is. Or maybe I introduced myself on my way. I did it at a conference and it worked well. So my very first project, we built an e-commerce store, and the management asked us about the server. I was okay. We need a server. Which one? There's I wanted to buy Sun. It's too expensive. No, we got HP. It was a cube, and we had to install everything on the server, and we were responsible for the server, right? And this was like DevOps. because we know we build it, we run it. So if something stopped, we get called, hey, what's up with the server? Then 2 years later, we are not allowed to touch the server because we get a DevOps department or Ops department, and they were responsible, to run the server, and we only were supposed, to copy the wars over. So this was serverless because I never saw the server. I didn't care about the server. I just copied the war and hoped it will work, and it worked mostly. But this was for me the serverless idea, and the database was set up, JMS cluster was set up. So for me, if everything was set up, managed services, I was happy. I never cared. I don't care whether you're running MQ series, whatever. I would like to have my JMS API and leave me alone, right? So, and in the cloud, what people are not understanding is if you go to the cloud, Azure or whatever, then the department becomes responsible to set up the entire infrastructure. So what it means is it is worse than before, because now you have to go to the cloud and you can spend, your first week with VNets and then subnets and the servers, and then maybe after 2 weeks you have whatever you had on premise. So I think the only way to improve your situation in the cloud is to go serverless and manage services. So what I say, before I will install Postgres on Azure, I will go with Cosmos DB because it's already there. You know what I'm saying? So the architecture has to change completely. And this is what I'm doing right now in projects to explain this, because what my clients tend to do is to say, okay, we had Kubernetes on premise, OpenShift. Now we will run OpenShift in the cloud. I'm saying, this doesn't work this way because OpenShift was run by different, department in the cloud. Someone will have to do it. And this is an interesting, situation. And what I also recognize on Azure, they also say, Kubernetes is actually a way to a complex. So what you can run, of course, AKS, but you can also run, Azure App Service, for instance, which is a way simpler and more understandable, or even Azure Container Apps, I think, is a newer service. And or what I did back then on Azure Container Instances, ACI, very simple and no clustering, service. And I prefer it always, before I use Kubernetes, because if I use ACI or Azure App Service, then what I can do is scale to zero. So what I can have, this is important in my projects, I would like that every developer gets an own, development environment, which is identical to production. And you can only achieve it with serverless. You cannot just, install a Kubernetes cluster per developer. And if you, start to create slices, it still will behave differently. So this is my observation, that actually serverless and managed services, even if they are proprietary, is actually a way to go to improve the situation, right? This is also your opinion, the whole, from Java EE to cloud. What would be, the right, strategy? Because in my opinion, we had serverless all the time on premise.
No, but it's interesting because my job at Microsoft is to follow Java customers to either migrate to Azure Cloud, or they're already there, but they want to go further. And there's so many different strategies. The 6 R's: rehost, replatform, repurchase, refactor, retire, blah, blah, blah. And it's true that some customers just do rehost, and that's exactly what you say. I have a VM with my app server, my Tomcat, my own Tomcat Jetty or whatever, with my own database. So we do have customers who start with rehosting, and basically, instead of using their own metal box, they use ours. But it's really, copy paste. Yeah. So they have the same VM with the same Tomcat. They install, a database or whatever. So rehosting is good for new applications who don't know anything about the cloud, because, and as you were saying, when you do just rehosting, that's going to take you months, because most of the customers who do that, they don't have a CI/CD pipeline. Everything is manual. They use a lot of Bash script with Word documents, so they don't use Terraform or whatever. So just in the rehosting, which will not save you a lot of money and not time, definitely, there is this learning curve that the customers start understanding what is CI/CD, what is the benefit. Even containerization is, also I have plenty of customers who don't do it. And then, it will be the replatforming. Now that we've spent 1 year, we know what a VNet is, we know what the Azure Web Console is, we know what Terraform is. Let's go further, which is, I don't want to manage my own VM and my own database. And as you say, let's go for hosted services. Yeah. And today in Azure, we had what is called Azure Container Apps. I think in AWS, it's called
Fargate.
Fargate. Azure Container Apps and Fargate are fantastic because you just deploy a container. Inside, there's whatever you want. As you say, it could be a monolith, a good old monolith or lambdas or functions or whatever. And then, if you don't do anything without any specific configuration, it will scale down to 0 automatically and scale up from 0 automatically. Then you can twist things if you want. But if the platform sees that your container is not being used, it will just put it to 0, and that costs you exactly $0. And if somebody is using it, then it will scale up to 1. And if a lot of people are using them, it can scale up to 10, 30, or 300. Yeah. So that's really interesting when you can benefit from all these managed services.
You mentioned Terraform. So Terraform, if you ask me, is technology from hell. So say this is like, Xdoclet version 01. So it's terrible. So what I'm surprised you didn't mention Bicep from Azure. Because,
that's true.
Because Bicep, at least they have proper for loops and if statements. This is, and what I advise to my clients, if you go, to Azure, just pick Azure. Why you, afraid of Azure if you go to Azure? Because if you would like to, migrate from Azure to AWS, you will spend most of time with VNets, IP address ranges, and the credentials, and not necessarily with Terraform. And this is the least problematic, part, because even you mentioned Fargate, ACS Fargate, and container apps. If you take a look at the API and the web resource API, they are completely different. You cannot just have the same Terraform script and provision both. So you need 2 scripts, and then there's interesting, what you would like to do is do the first one and the second one and see what they are working. I don't even see the strategy, but Bicep is actually nice. You can run. You get syntax highlighting in Visual Studio Code. It's officially supported by Azure. And what I'm doing, if I do Azure, I do Bicep. On AWS, I do CDK. And Terraform, I would use, for stuff which is not supported in both cases. I don't know if I have proprietary, OpenShift maybe extensions or something which is not supported by. So I can use Terraform for it. But I don't know whether you use Terraform. So what happens in real world projects? The first thing that happens, they start Terraform and they find that the entire state is on their machine. They say, okay, what's now? 2 developers cannot work on it because and we have to maintain the state somewhere else. And with Bicep, the Bicep is now translated to this Azure ARM, I think. Yep. And this is actually the way to go, if you ask me, right?
Well, since I've joined Microsoft and work on Azure, I also became more expert on AWS. We have lots of customers who do hybrid cloud. They want to run on-prem and one app on Azure, the other app on on AWS, JCP also. We see it less. I don't know why.
Yeah, less. Yeah.
So then comes the good old war, Java EE versus Spring versus whatever. Because in the cloud, I really don't see a lot of standardization.
No.
Terraform, as you say, even if you know the language of the Terraform, then the modules are different from Azure to AWS. The way the SDKs are, the way the managed services are, the CLIs, everything. So we do have a lot of customers who do hybrid cloud. On-prem, they do Bash. On Azure they can do Bicep. On AWS they do Terraform. But it's really difficult, and that's why we even have some customers who don't do any prioritary stuff. They will stay, go back to PostgreSQL instead of using Cosmo DB or things like that. So we even have some customers who try to be as cloud agnostic as possible, but of course it's impossible to be zero. It's just impossible. I don't see all these cloud vendors, sitting around a table and trying to agree on a set of APIs, I don't see that happening in the near future. So there is vendor locking, that's for sure.
So I'm actually a client, a customer of yours, if you will, because either I'm using Azure or AWS, GCP less. So I would say right now, because of my project, mostly AWS, but this is just because this is the momentary project situation that I see already Azure is coming. But for me is first, what is the motivation of my clients? So the first case is the management decided to go to AWS or Azure and no one knows why. So this is actually the worst possible case because, and even worse, if the company is big, they have unlimited budget and they do whatever they like and it doesn't make any sense. And then I just wait until it becomes too expensive and everyone comes back. So this is actually, in this project, I just, see you in 1 year and then we will try to optimize because I try to, what I say in the cloud, for me, cost-driven architecture. In cloud, the only thing which matters is cost because if Azure App Service and Azure Container Apps, they are identical. The only, for the developer, the only difference is the costs model. See that, right? So the Container Apps is serverless, and Azure App Service you have to buy the CPU or whatever, and both make sense. But it depends on your workload, depends on the application, and this is the decision regarding to cost, not architecture. Because as developer, I will ship my Quarkus after reading your 2 books with Docker, and you are done, right? So it doesn't matter whether it runs on Container Apps or Azure App Service or Kubernetes or Azure Function. For us Java developers, it really doesn't matter. So the first one, it happens sometimes, and they are the reasonable start. So I never heard about scalability or latency in my projects. So it is always on-premise is good enough. But what happens is some of my clients run out of capacity. They cannot, the data center is too small. So if they go to Azure or AWS, they don't care that it is more expensive. They will run some workloads there and it should be identical to the local version. So this is reasonable. The next one, what I saw is disaster recovery. They had 1 data center, but they need 2 with catastrophic recovery. If something happens, water disaster or whatever, they have both those data centers, so they are forced to do so. The similar story, if they have Postgres on-premise, they will maybe use Postgres in the cloud. So then on a greenfield project, what happened to me, which was actually surprising, we had to go to the cloud because of security. So interesting enough, Azure and AWS, they have compliance in every direction. Everything is encrypted. It is hard to achieve on-premise. So the most data centers are not as secured as the data centers in the clouds. This is also a true story. And then it's a different because we start on greenfield. So we say, okay, we have experience in always Java EE. What is actually what we can do in the cloud? On Azure, it was Azure Functions with Cosmos DB and the blob storage, for instance. This was the natural fit. And I forgot the messaging solution, but it was not JMS.
EventHub.
Yeah. But it was not GMS because it was pointless. Like why I need an abstraction for GMS because I will run on Azure anyway. So on AWS is AWS Lambda with DynamoDB or S3. So first S3 and then DynamoDB. And if we need messaging, we use SNS, SQS or Kinesis, but not Kafka because I know why I have to manage my own Kafka cluster. This is pointless in the cloud. But on premise, I would always prefer Kafka and GMS. This is complete different architecture, right? So this goes in this direction. It was the security, it was disaster recovery often, and this basically was. And if we go to the cloud, also important, the entire automation. We would like to automate everything, and so in one day, if we go from AWS to Azure, So I will also automate it on Azure, and would like to have the same tests, in both cases. So this is actually, so this is why we look, how we can easily automate on Azure. This is Bicep, and how we can easily automate, on AWS is a CDK. So I don't use CloudFormation, I use CDK, and on Azure I don't use ARM templates, I use Bicep, and it's very very similar architecture, and for me it's not about portability, it's more about switching costs. If I'm on Azure and the code is simple, maybe in 1 week I can measure to AWS, even if I have to rewrite, some scripts. And portability is usually, I invest a lot in Kubernetes and in hope that one day I can migrate between clouds, but I invested that much that even if I will migrate, it never pays off, right?
It's interesting because Kubernetes is the new app server.
It's the new WebSphere classic.
Yeah, because as I said, I have customers who do on-prem, hybrid cloud, and they think Kubernetes is the portable, the portability. So they install Kubernetes on-prem.
Yeah.
They didn't have it.
Which makes sense. In the cloud, it doesn't make any sense because you have two clouds. You have like Spring Boot in Whitefly,
But they do that. They go from we were happy on-prem with our scripts and with our VMs. Now we are adding Kubernetes on-prem. So, you have to train everybody. You have to start things everybody. Why? Because we will use Kubernetes. We will use AKS on Azure and the Kubernetes version on AWS. So there's this idea that Kubernetes is the new grail of portability. You can deploy everywhere, develop once and deploy everywhere with Kubernetes.
Which is less true than with Java EE, because
Exactly.
in Kubernetes, then you don't even have Docker registry, you don't have, the ingresses. This is, yeah. By the way, I invited Kelsey Hightower to my podcast, and we had chat about that. And he said, this is the guy from Evangelist from Kubernetes from Google, and he said, it was never meant that way that you're playing with YAML. So the Kubernetes is always meant as a platform, And I say, yeah, that's what I see. And from my perspective, on Azure, you can play with Kubernetes behind, Azure App Service all the time. I don't care, but I would like, just to have a nicer way to interact with the cloud and not YAML, right? So this is, and even worse on AWS, if you would like to have a Kubernetes, what usually happens, you have to use CDK to provision the cloud, the VPCs and subnets and so forth. And then you get CDK 8S, there's a CDK Kubernetes for Kubernetes. And the second level is Kubernetes setup. And after that, you have, something similar to Fargate or Azure App Service, and you're still not done. And I did code reviews, so the developers were completely confused. They didn't even know how to manage credentials because Kubernetes had own users, the cloud had own users. I'm saying, okay, yeah, sure. You have two clouds, one main cloud, and then is the open source cloud on top of the main cloud. But this is hard to explain, but this is obvious, for us. I think for most Java EE people, it's very obvious because, we had this serverless notion all the time. And now it gets worse if we do lift and shift.
And just to add something on what you just said, it's true that it comes from the ops side of it. Mm-hmm. Let's install Kubernetes on-prem. Let's use AKS. So the ops guys and everybody, move this way, train, do CI/CD pipeline deployment. Everything got really complex. But then it goes down to local development. Mm-hmm. And I have some customers just to run an Hello World. They need to install Minikube. Mm-hmm. So the developers need to install, Minikube just because, as you say, it depends, I don't know, on the key vault, on the credentials, on so much dependencies that even to run something simple, you need Minikube. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's like 20 years ago where you had to install WebSphere locally to, run a bloody...
But 20 years ago, it was only WebSphere Classic that's crazy. All other application servers were reasonable. This was the thing, Even WebLogic was great. We had that story. The WebLogic 8 was perfect. It started, I don't know, in 10 seconds or whatever back then. And it was one jar and it started, right? Classic was impossible to install, the WebSphere, but all other servers were reasonable. And we do the same mistake 20 years ago, even worse, because this is like we would install an operating system where we could actually run the app if we don't do any mistakes, and in order to do those, we have to play with YAML, because the YAML is so complex. We have to use the Xdoclet, it's called Helm chart, to generate the YAML. In one project, they were proud of a Helm chart. I was like, you are all crazy, 50 parameters. We need actually 2, RAM, CPU, maybe on where the Docker container lives, and you are playing with Helm charts here, right? So Helm charts is good for Azure people who create Azure container instances to the platform, but for developers. And the next thing, what I think cloud will become some traction. Funny story, which is actually serious. In a project, there was a project manager, and he likes Quarkus and all the stuff, and he had a product presentation, and every management says okay. And I wanted also to contribute something, to the conversation, and I say, but we are green and CO2 neutral, and this made the biggest impact ever. So everyone remembered my sentence, everyone, and what we do behind the scenes didn't matter. So it was the birds are important and the green IT was important, right? And I forgot about that, and then I delivered a workshop for a bank, and I asked, at the beginning of the workshop, what do you like to hear? And actually, surprising, many developers wanted to hear something about green IT. And I say, okay, it's crazy. And then I was my client, and they say they are forced, to do CO2 stuff. So what it means is, some company in Germany at least are forced to somehow by law, or depending on I have to investigate a little bit more, to show, what your CO2 footprint is in the entire production chain. And then they become more interesting in serverless. And the reason being is pay as you go. If you invoke something, on the invoice, you see it was invoked that many times. But at least you will see, they can somehow relate this to CO2 consumption, to energy consumption, or whatever. So this becomes increasingly important. And what I also find, management of smaller companies, so if I have no chance to talk to them, is the serverless and managed services, they look different on the invoice. So what they are talking about is called marginal costs. And what marginal costs is, imagine we have a Quarkus function, buy a pet in your pet store, right? If this function an invocation cost us, 50 cents, but the revenue to buy the pet store is like €5. No one cares about how often it is invoked. And this is what this management would like to see. It is pointless how expensive it is, how much margin they have per call. And this is impossible in Kubernetes. So at the KubeCon, they are announcing, another open source tools which measure the costs inside Kubernetes. And I was okay, now we have a monolithic cloud, and now we need even more tools to find out what's going on. So I know projects, they pay, thousands of euros per month in Kubernetes, and they have no idea what's run inside. So they have a rough idea, but they cannot tell you exactly which microservice, consumes how much, resources. But pay as you go, you exactly see everywhere. You say, okay, this function was invoked this time, Cosmos DB is invoked, millions of times. And this is the future for invoicing, I would say, which is incredibly important for management.
And, you were saying previously, why am I customers moving to the cloud? You mentioned security, scalability, multi-region is also one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
disaster recovery is multi-region, right? Yeah.
And it's true that energy saving is also becoming something, because Azure has already said, by 2030, we will be equal in terms of CO2. Mm-hmm. And by 2050, we will recover everything from the beginning. So these companies, when you call Azure or AWS, your energy bill is huge, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So they are the first ones trying to improve every little bit of their data center.
Yes.
And some customers have that, they are being asked, what do you do? What do you do for CO2 and energy? And instead of doing a huge effort on their side, it's also one use case. We will go to the cloud where we can measure everything, and we can show numbers, and we know Azure or AWS will make more and more efforts, because these huge data centers, costs a lot of money for Microsoft and Amazon.
What I know about Azure is, I think in your console, you can also see, how an energy efficient particular region is, which becomes increasingly important. And I would say on-premise data centers cannot compete with Azure or AWS because you are building, custom hardware. You have your, the airflow already optimized. The power. So it is incredibly efficient. And I don't know whether I forgot about the project. I think Project Nautica, right, from Azure, where you had your own data center, in the ocean. They try, to cool it. This was actually a cool one.
Yeah.
So lots of experiments going on. But one
because to have a data center under the ocean, you need a lot of R&D, so you can't do it yourself. That's for sure.
And no octopus, which is disturbing.
We kill birds, white bears. Let's not kill the octopus.
The octopus is a very good one. There's a worm for him. He will love your data centers in the ocean. So Antonio, one suggestion. You will come back, and I would like to hear Java on Azure because I was unprepared that you are on Azure. The next time I would like to talk Kubernetes a little bit less. I mean, because everyone knows that you can run for thousands of euros a Kubernetes and start a hello world with in Minikube. So this will work after you invest a lot in YAML editing tools. But we had it already with Xdoclet and Helm charts and everything, right? So, but more modern stuff. Azure Functions, for instance. You can run Quarkus on Azure Function out of the box. You can run Azure Container Instances, Azure Container Apps, Azure Container Services. So I would say we would try to investigate as many ways to run Java on Azure as possible.
Let's do that. If you want, I'll come back and we can focus on Java
this
on
would be
Azure
cool.
if you want.
Yeah,
cool.
This would be nice. So this, then where people can buy your books if they are still available, and where they can find you.
Well, I'm not big on social networks, so I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. I tried Mastodon like everybody. I tried many things, but it ends up that I'm not big on social media. So Twitter is good. LinkedIn, and for my books, you can actually buy them on Amazon. Mm-hmm. You can even print them because Amazon now has this thing where you can print per copy. So if you want a physical version of my book, you can.
But this is not new. You always had the printed books. You're saying, this is very new that you have a paper book.
No, because with Amazon, what I did first is I published my books in EPUBs. So you could only have them on EPUBs. And a few years ago, they said, now you can also have a PDF and we will print it for you. So that's nice. So I have the two formats. And if you give me a few months, I'm trying to update my books for Quarkus 3, which is really good. Quarkus 3, Jakarta EE10, and plenty of goodies. So I've started to update my Quarkus books to be Quarkus 3 compliant, but you'll have to give me a few more months.
But you said if you are bored, you are writing books, right?
My God, I have kids.
What I understood, now you are working for Microsoft. I mean, maybe you should cut it out, this section with,
I would love to be bored. I think I don't have time to be bored anymore, which is a real pain.
Yeah. It was really nice, to talk to catch up with you, and interesting that you're working for Microsoft. I didn't knew that, so even better.
And let's not wait for 2 years to meet in person.
Perfect.
Let's wait somewhere. Let's meet somewhere, have a beer.
Yeah. Or make milk because it's better for the birds. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everybody.